Escalator going up, escalator coming down. Well, if you insist, then I can't resist your escalator pitch.
Hello, everyone. Good evening, and welcome to the Escalator Pitch Podcast. Also, good morning, and good night, and good afternoon.
Whenever the fuck you're listening.
I get a little, interested in movies when they have, space time, when they have to tell time in space.
Yeah.
What the fuck? You're not always going to test time by years, right? Or human clocks. This always got me, was in The Man of Steel, the remake of, Zack Snyder's Man of Steel. You got Zod, right? He fucking hates Earth. He hates Earth with a passion.
Right.
He wants to destroy this motherfucker. But then at the part where he's revealing his master plan and he's saying, we've been out in space for 33 years, waiting for 33 years, and hammering home 33 years. Why? Because it's a Jesus metaphor? No! Kryptons don't measure time in years. They measure them in schmaldowns or whatever the hell their increment of time around their sun is, not in years.
Right. There was that there's that Chris Nolan movie where they go to some planet and time changes based on what fucking Interstellar. Yeah. Which doesn't make sense to me. I watched it going that's not the way it works, is it? That doesn't make sense, but it's also I guess it kind of makes sense, but then they came up and he's an old man. I was just...
Yeah, I don't know. We're not astrophysicists and we're not scientists, but...
Well, I actually am.
Oh, you are?
Astrophysicist.
I had no clue, man. Here I am talking about years and parsecs and shit, and you're actually an astrophysicist.
I literally just said, Chris Nolan made this movie, and I have no idea. I doodle pictures, man. I have no idea. That stuff's way over my head.
Exactly. I picked my ass. But that is bullshit. That is a studio note where they were like, well, nobody's going to know it's Jesus, so you must say that it's 33 years because Jesus died at 33 years. Blah, blah, blah. Shut up! Shut up! I'm sorry. I'm already yelling.
No, I liked it. He's got his head shaking. You guys are missing it. He's into this. He hates the Jesus years thing. I don't think that was a studio. That's a total Zack Snyder move.
Is it?
That's
or David Goyer, maybe.
Oh, yeah. Or David Goyer. They're both kind of, every once in a while, they just throw in something where they're like, you know what? This moment needs a little bit of Jesus thrown in just for fun.
Yeah, I mean, we got to really hammer it home. Another thing before we get going that's been brought to our attention. So there's been a couple of people who have come out and said that there are podcasts that are similar to the concept that you're making your podcast about. And, okay, thanks, Jeffrey. Thanks, Jeffrina. Are you also pissed off that there's 1,000 fucking true crime podcasts?
Right.
Does that irk you? Are you upset about that, Jeffrey?
There's a godzillion podcast. You know what we bring that's different? Us, motherfuckers! Us!
And Mikey the intern.
Mikey, get in here. Get in here. Who are the motherfuckers saying this?
Everyone.
They're talking shit. And look, this is my thing. I want to spread positivity and light and love. So
You do?
Ultimately, I'm a short-term pessimist and a long-term optimist. That's
right, dude, I love that. That's why we get along, man.
So I offer an olive branch to these podcasts and say, hey, instead of feeding into troll bullshit, why don't we do a crossover? We all obviously love movies, so let's fucking collaborate. Why does it have to be an adversarial thing?
100%. And the other thing is, like you said, there's a million true crime podcasts. There's a million fucking movie review podcasts. Every fucking person has a podcast at this point. What we gain from this is being able to fucking study up on stuff, have some fun, and talk about movies. And I hope you guys want to come along on the ride with us.
Exactly. I mean, look, there's the thing called simultaneous creation. It's just a thing that happens in human history. Like a guy in Japan and a guy in Nebraska will come up with a gritty reboot for, say, Hamburger the movie at the exact same time. And that's not like that guy ripped off that guy. No, it's just humans have this thing, a collective unconscious, and we all come up with similar ideas and things happen. That's why you get Armageddon and Deep Impact. Or Volcano and Dante's Peak, or 1,000 lesbian vampire movies in the 1970s. Just leave us alone. Humans are dreamers. They like to dream. We're dreaming here on this podcast. So that's probably why I feel a little upset at the moment, but we'll get over it.
And speaking of dreaming, that's the perfect segue into what this episode is. You want to know what we haven't done yet?
What?
We haven't introduced ourselves.
Oh, that's right. Here we are thinking everybody knows who we are. Well, you are?
I am Josh Stifter, director of The Good Exorcist, reality guy from Rebel Without a Crew, the series. I'm working on my second feature film, Greywood's Plot, right now. Today I was putting a fucking dick monster head onto a tree person's body. I'm doing fucked up stuff.
I'm John Brennan. I've done things with Troma Entertainment. I produced a couple of their movies, and I'm also of the Last Drive-In with Bob Briggs. I wrote the theme song, and I've been on the show, and I drive JOHN McNAUGHTON around. It's crazy.
That's who we are. But this week, what are we? We were talking. You were saying something about dreams. What are we talking about this week?
This week, we are talking about one of the greatest franchises in history of movies, in the history of horror, A Nightmare on Elm Street.
I was thinking about this today as I was kind of studying up on this. I would go as far as to say it's the most influential and most watched franchise by me. Now, my only argument would be the Alien franchise, which was super inspirational, I love the Alien movies. I watch them far more than anything else, but because of the amount of movies, every year I do a marathon of the Nightmare on Elm Street movies. So I've definitely watched them more times as a full series.
I agree. The same thing. Like when I was a kid growing up, I'm a little older than you, so Freddy was just like everywhere. He was just in the collective ether. He was all over the place. I mean, he was on fucking lunchboxes. He was everywhere. But, I started out a little afraid of him, but then I got into it with this movie, The Dream Warriors, when it suddenly became these kids that band together and fought Freddy with their dream powers. And that to me was like, that's not scary anymore, because if you're with your friends and they have these crazy powers to fight this demon, then suddenly it's a little more easy to maneuver through those dreams when Freddy's coming to get you. Right.
And so my kid is 6 years old, and I was showing him some of the monsters I'm making for my movie today, and he was like, ah! And he ran off screaming. And I started thinking about the fact that I watched Nightmare on Elm Street, the first one, I think when I was like 3 or 4 years old.
Wow.
Isn't that fucking insane?
That's so insane. That's insane.
I went over to the neighbor boy's house, and he had an older brother, and his older brother was like, sit down and watch this with me, and would show us fucking Nightmare on Elm Street. And we'd watch it. We'd play the NES video game and stuff. But that, you said before about how it was like part of the culture. I was like 3 or 4 years old at that point, and it was still part of my culture. That's how fucking huge it was.
Absolutely. And, did you have nightmares? Like, I mean, there's that first one is crazy. There's blood shooting out when the Johnny Depp gets killed. There's 3 million gallons of blood shooting out, and like the girl getting like basically raped on the ceiling. I mean, that movie is harsh. How did you survive?
It's really harsh. I had nightmares, and I still, to this day, I have like night terror or sleep paralysis sometimes and night terrors.
Oh.
And I think part of it comes from seeing these horror movies at a young age. And like, so people who have night terrors, they say everyone sees different things. And, like some people see the tall man or whatever they call a slender man. Some people see like little goblin thing or whatever. I always saw like this old scaly man, and I think that comes from Freddy Krueger. I think Freddy Krueger was so burnt into my mind and was such a part of the zeitgeist at that time that when I started having nightmares as a little kid, I had nightmares about Freddy Krueger.
You know what's weird is that I've had a couple of sleep paralysis or like, waking dreams when I see something and then I jump up screaming, and it's always an old lady. And the reason why, I think, is because of Darby O'Gill and the Little People. Have you ever seen this movie? It's
yeah.
That part with the banshee when they open up the back door and it's like, whoa! I probably saw that when I was like 3 or 4, and it's a Disney movie, but it's so scary at that. There's like 2 or 3 scary parts. So yeah, you're right. Like when you're a kid and you see these things, they kind of stick with you forever.
And in mine, he's always wearing like really fancy clothes, and I think that comes from Labyrinth. I think David Bowie haunts my dreams in fancy clothes and a codpiece.
The humongous bulge.
Yeah, the big old bulge.
I've heard from many a woman that their like first sexual fantasy was of David Bowie in Labyrinth.
Really?
Oh yeah, say what you will about that, but I understand. I mean, his crotch is like fucking, it's like 3 baseballs in there.
It is. It is. It's the most terrifying thing of the movie. Is that, especially as a 5-6-year-old boy, I was just like, "Daddy, what is it? What is it?"
He's like, "Schmow, magic, schmow, magic, schmow, magic, schmow, magic, meow,
schmow." Yeah, it's fucking terrifying. But that is the importance of Nightmare on Elm Street, like, and the fact that it launched this massive franchise. Holy shit.
And I mean, Freddy Krueger is essentially the Frankenstein's monster, Dracula, Wolfman of the 80s. I mean, you had the heyday of the Universal monsters, and then in the 80s you had Freddy, you had Jason, you had Michael Myers. Even though he started in the 70s, he continued on through the 80s, and these were the days. These were just as good, if not better, than the Universal Monster days.
I know, but I think the big thing about Nightmare on Elm Street versus the other ones, and I don't want to shit on the other ones, I like them, but Robert Englund's performance mixed with that makeup was so much better to me. Like Jason, there's no performance per se. It's just a big guy walking around with a generally cheap costume. Like, if you look at it as not a filmmaker, but as a general audience, which at age 7, 8, when I'm first seeing these, I'm just a general audience. I'm not thinking about it like as a filmmaker. All I'm seeing is, okay, this guy just has a mask and a jumpsuit. This guy just has a mask and a jumpsuit. This guy's got a fucking dope, ripped up sweater with this crazy makeup. His face is coming out of telephones, a giant snake eating people.
Oh, yeah.
It was just so much bigger and so much more production value, which is why magazines like Fangoria just jumped on it. Like, at that time, when I was about 10 years old, that's when I started getting into Fangoria magazine and trying to get all the back issues I could. Fucking, there wasn't an issue that didn't have Freddy Krueger in it. Every single issue had him in it, and it's because he's fun to look at. He's interesting,
he's
and
funny.
Robert Englund is always fun to listen to. He's funny. He's perfect.
There was also a 900 number. Call 1-900-909-FRED. Yeah. We'll try to find it's probably on YouTube somewhere. And then also, of course, Will Smith does his Nightmare on My Street. So it became like just this pop culture phenomenon, even beyond the scares. He almost became like the Mickey Mouse of horror, which I love. But this is what we'll start to, I guess, talk about. Is there was an original draft of Nightmare on Elm Street Part 3 that it was called The Dream Warriors. It's by Wes Craven and a gentleman, we got to shout him out because I don't remember exactly what his name is. Right here, Bruce Wagner. And this is way different. Although, okay, the concept is still the same. You got the Dream Warriors, you got Nancy and her dad like sort of trying to fight Freddy from the first one, but there's just so many differences in this thing, and I kind of like some of it more than what was in the finished movie, truthfully.
Really?
Some of it. Not all of it. There's a lot of clunkers. We'll go through. There's some dialogue that was like, holy shit. And there's a particular love scene in here that I think I'll read out loud later with a little Barry White music underneath. Just to let everybody know that this wasn't a perfect thing. But it also, I read somewhere that it was a first draft. So if they had gone on and continued to hone this script, you never know what it could have become.
Yeah, and so I didn't read it verbatim, like word for word. I kind of went through what was in it, what was different, and just skimmed through it. And it felt like a first draft to me. That's instantly what I thought as I was reading it. And I could see how it sort of became what it was. However, looking deeper into it, it is shocking how many versions of the third movie were written or pitched, or how many ideas got thrown out there. There was like 20 other people writing scripts at the same time. Like, there was like 18 scripts, I think, written for the third movie.
And some of the people, like John Saxon, wrote his own version.
John Saxon wrote his own version. That's crazy to me.
Which we'll get into, like, that part of it later. But also, who else? Robert Englund had his own idea for what Part 3 should be.
He did, and I actually think the Robert Englund version sounds really interesting. Freddy's Funhouse, or what is that what it's called?
Yeah, Freddy's Funhouse. I'll have to look and we'll read exactly here. We'll pitch. We'll promote some of these articles where people covered it, and we'll read exactly what they're all about. But first, let's get into this script, all right? When a script on page 1 has the words placental goo,
yes.
you know you're in for some shit.
You've got a winner. Well, and that's the thing about